Hello, this is Rick, and welcome to Astralclub. Well, you folks are just amazing. Uh, we've rocketed over 1,000 subscribers. I want to thank everyone, and especially all my new subscribers and the ones who came over from Reddit. You are very, very much appreciated. I promised that once we hit 1,000, I would do something a little special, and I'm going to share with you a visit, a story, a trip that I have never shared before. All I've ever done is drop some hints before on Reddit and YouTube, but this is the first time the entire story is going to be told. I had to dig up my journal notes that I made when I returned from this journey, but I had to flesh them out and I had to write it all down because it was such an in-depth experience for me. And I think you're going to find it interesting. So, without further ado, I'm going to tell you about my visit to Planet Amphibia. I left my body and soared above the earth. Hovering in the blackness between the moon and earth, I decided to try my luck with an outer space astral journey. I'd been projecting throughout the galaxy at random over the last several months and had visited a handful of stars and solar systems. Every star I had visited had planets, although I noticed that many had large gas giants closer to their parent sun, with the rocky planets coming afterwards. I'm sure this fact might be of interest to astronomers, but it meant nothing to me. Perhaps our solar system, with the rocky Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars located in the inner solar system, had developed in a different way than these alien systems had. The rocky planets I visited, unfortunately, were lifeless. These dead space rocks were either in a deep freeze or lava-covered wastelands. I had located an ocean on one planet, but frequent steaming geysers rising above the water on my exploratory low approaches revealed temperatures that were probably too hot to sustain any sort of advanced life. While my deep space travels were interesting, and I kept detailed notes following each trip, I knew I needed to find life to truly keep my interest level high, enough to sustain future astral projections into the deep void of space. On this trip, I decided not to pick a star at random for visitation, as I had previously, but to extend my consciousness outwards to locate life. In moments, I began to get signals, not radio impulses, but the astral radiation that is emitted by life, and most especially intelligent life. Hundreds and perhaps thousands of planets with simple life to sophisticated civilization beamed into my extended astral senses. The din grew to the volume and pressure of a rock concert, threatening to overwhelm me. I latched onto one thread of light that comforted me and immediately severed my link with the other candidates to preserve my sanity. With my internal peace restored, I hurled myself along the light path chosen. After a moment of unconsciousness, I found myself hovering above a rocky planet in a binary star system. Flying closer, I observed 3 large land masses adrift in a universal ocean. One of the continents was covered in ice, while the other 2, hovering in the center of the world, had greenery, lakes, and forests. Far below me on the coasts, I saw signs of habitation, signaling intelligent life. I felt a desire to introduce myself to this civilization, but knew my status as an astral spirit precluded my being seen by these alien inhabitants. To solve this dilemma, I hit upon a technique I had used successfully on Earth. If I wanted to interact with physical people, I had to project into the future. Doing so invariably allowed future residents of Earth to see, touch, and communicate with me in a way impossible in my typical ghostly astral state. The decision made, I willed myself 2,000 years into the future of this world. Once more, I lost consciousness. I awoke hovering a few thousand feet above the planet. My first thought was it appeared drier than it had previously. However, given the relatively short time jump, seasonal differences could easily account for the lesser greenery I now beheld. I flew onwards until I sighted a small town on the shore of the ocean. Below me, I estimated, was a home of some thousands of alien beings. As I descended, a giant obsidian amphitheater stood proudly in the center of town, fed by spokes that on closer examination were deep troughs of hard-baked clay. I theorized they might be roads of some kind that led to this central marketplace. From my elevated perch, I could see they extended for many miles into a snow-capped mountain range. I gently descended into a marketplace center filled with tables of greenery and seafood to see what sort of reception I could expect. The overwhelming welcome I received shocked me. The 3 to 5 feet, that's 1 to about 1.5 meters, tall residents mobbed me, gently stroking my now solid astral body. While I couldn't feel their touch, as I had no nerves to relay that tactile data, I could sense their mild surprise, but very evident goodwill directed towards me. I felt shame at how different the reception of Earth people to such an unexpected alien visitation might be. My new friends had a yellow-green mottled appearance with amphibian-like gill slits on either side of their roughly humanoid bodies. Each wore a cloak of interlaced vegetation that covered most of their body, but I could see their faces clearly. Their hands jutted outside their leafy coverings, and I counted 4 webbed fingers and an opposable thumb. A clear gelatinous membrane covered the visible body parts that I imagined my physical body, were it currently in attendance, would certainly find slimy. After a few moments of my gracious welcoming mob, the tallest among my new friends uttered a guttural grunt, and the sea of bodies parted, granting me some space. "You are most welcome here, as all visitors are from the beyond spaces," the tall one said. Unlike Star Trek, she, and I sensed a female-type energy, didn't speak to me in American English. Instead, I was able to glean this general greeting by reading her thoughts. Without physical ears, I wouldn't have been able to hear the series of grunts anyway. While her thoughts were very alien in nature, I felt my translation was probably at least in the ballpark of the actual meaning of her words. As these words sank in further, I realized that I wasn't the first visitor here. I wondered if others from Earth might have reached here as well, as I had progressed into the future. I must admit to a mild disappointment that I couldn't make the claim of being the Neil Armstrong here, but more like the second Buzz Aldrin. I beamed my own greeting and thanked them for their lovely welcome after my long trip. "You are invited to attend our festival that is approaching at the coming of the dawn. Until that time, you must come to my cavern as my guest. she announced. With that, she turned to lead the way, and a few of the smaller aliens, who I assumed were children, took my hands and arms and led me along behind my new host. The path from the marketplace was a mixture of sand, stone, and gravel. Lining the sides were trees with scaly bark and sprouting greenery that reached directly upwards into the sky. All in all, I imagined ancient Egypt might be the best analog for what I was seeing scenery and technology-wise. Of course, the pharaohs didn't have gills, and there weren't two suns beaming their hot rays from two different horizons onto the pyramids. Home was a large igloo-like structure made from sun-baked reddish clay. A small covered antechamber led to where a door should be. My host and several of her children who had accompanied me began to abruptly disrobe. I sensed no shame in their sudden nakedness. In fact, a wave of relief of discarding a burden washed over their conscious minds. They looked at me briefly, expecting me to likewise disrobe, but I beamed that I preferred to maintain my current state of dress. With a slight shrug, my hostess reached forward to part a membrane, allowing us to enter the cavern proper. Inside, I found a large central room that appeared much like an artfully constructed Japanese garden with a large, shallow central pool. Surrounding the pool were sandstone rocks arranged in a rough semicircle. Along the periphery of the round chamber were glowing rocks that supplied a pleasant level of light to the relaxing atmosphere. My new friends displayed their amphibian nature, and they glided into the pool without a single splash or ripple. Each stayed under the water for at least 10 minutes or so before returning to the surface. I judged the actual depth of the water to be approximately 12 feet, about 3.5 meters. If the water hadn't been so shallow and the calmness of the proceedings so complete, I would have dived underwater to act as a lifeguard to assist these drowning victims. However, it became obvious as I stared down into the pool that the rhythmic movement of their gills proved that they were in no danger of drowning. In fact, I soon noticed that I was being waved into the water by all and sundry as they frolicked along the bottom. Not to be a bad guest, I lowered myself into the pool as gently as I could and swam to them at the bottom. Some of the children found my entry a bit clumsy, and a low murmur reverberated throughout the water that felt like laughter. I smiled back, but a look from my female host abruptly stifled the vibrations. She touched my neck as she looked for gills that disappeared from our human evolutionary line long ago. With a look of puzzlement, she pondered how I could breathe in the pool without gills. I beamed to her that I was a traveler who was using a type of projected energy body to visit her lovely planet. As such, I didn't require oxygen, food, or water to live. I don't believe she completely understood the concepts that I had tried to impart to her, but an innate politeness that I felt was part of her race caused her just to drop the topic. We remained in the pool for several hours. Once out, my amphibian friend seemed a little tired, but serene. The children and I reclined on the rocks next to the pool, soaking in the heat and light from the glowing rocks, while my host disappeared into an adjoining room. When she reappeared, she was carrying a clay bowl of shellfish and greens. All ate hungrily from the common bowl, while I gently watched, smiling. Feeling a little awkward, I started a conversation. "What do you call this planet?" I asked. "Planet?" She appeared puzzled. I could see that in her mind that her people weren't the astronomers, the astronomers that Earth people had been. They didn't have an overarching name for their planet because they didn't see it as some independent part of a greater whole that required an individual name. It was a tough call, but I decided to invoke the non-interference directive here from Star Trek. It wasn't my task to change the philosophy, religion, or worldview of these people. I thought it best to change the topic of conversation and quietly name the planet Amphibia. Please tell me of this festival, I asked. My host brightened with the mention of the festival. It is called the Return of the Waters, she said, grinning widely. All the people congregate in the great amphitheater as the melting waters flood down from the mountains into the aqueducts to fill our underground cisterns for the dry times. There are games of swimming, hunting, fishing, and proof of bravery and courage. When the blessing of the monsoon rains occur, the festival culminates with the coming of the rains and the joining of the people. The above was my best English version of what she telepathically shared with me. But I couldn't help but feel like a kid watching a cartoon movie when the adults started laughing for no apparent reason. At any rate, this festival seemed like an important event to witness firsthand. Following dinner, my new friends wished me a pleasant night's rest. Before retiring, though, one of the children took me to her small room to show it to me. It was sparsely furnished with a very small, shallow wading pool, a few small rocks, and a reed mat alongside the pool. I told her it looked very comfortable, and she appeared very pleased with herself. In the morning, the family bustled about preparing for the festival. Everyone placed wreaths on their head with flowers that looked like a cross between sunflowers and lily pads. Much to my embarrassment, my hostess was most insistent that I wear one as well, as I was told it symbolized life and rebirth. As an ambassador of Earth, I bore my flowery crown with whatever dignity I could summon. I issued a silent thanks that my wife and daughter couldn't see me now, as I knew the stories about my ridiculous appearance would never be allowed to die from family lore. Leaving the cavern, we joined throngs of amphibians making their flower-topped heads to the large black amphitheater that I had seen the day before from the air. As we got closer, I saw the enormous structure appeared to have been carved from a volcanic glass-type rock. How this had been accomplished, I had no earthly idea. I managed to ask my hostess the origin of the obsidian wonder, but in the bedlam of the throng of festival attendants, all I got from her was that it was ancient and had always been there. There was no time for additional questions as we were carried along into the building by the thousands before and behind us. The row upon row of shelving looked much like any Roman Colosseum. The only difference were the patrons were here reclined upon the shelves, and a latticework above showered the people below in a fine mist of water. I would have loved to have learned how this misting rain was engineered, but the start of the Festival of the Return of the Waters began with an array of shells being blown by trumpeters and an accompanying shout from the audience. Although I had no ears with which to hear all these sounds, I could feel the vibrations and sense the tense emotions of the surrounding aliens. Without warning, I soon felt the entire stadium vibrating as torrents of water from a network of pipes the diameter of an adult human poured fluid onto the floor of the complex. Within a matter of minutes, a very deep pool formed. Another roar came from the stands as swimmers launched themselves into the new pool in a swimming competition. I was amazed at the agility and quickness of these natural athletes. Even the slowest of these amphibians would have put the best human Olympic swimmer to shame. Their movement in the water was much more reminiscent of seals in the oceans of Earth than a typical clumsy human mucking about in the water. The winner was given a garland of sea greens and a croaking shout from the audience. Next up was a beast hunt. Giant eels with sharp fangs were released into the waters from some trapdoor. The beasts swam rapidly and were about twice the length of my alien allies. I showed visible fear as I watched about 10 of the former swimming contestants leap into the now toothy waters with nothing but a sharpened spear apiece. My hostess was reclining nearby, placed her hand upon my shoulder to comfort me. However, I needn't have worried. Although one of the hunters had been bitten by the sharp-toothed monsters on the shoulder, all were successful in killing the eels. I assumed the test of bravery was up next, when a beast that looked like a nightmarish cross between a shark and a crocodile glided darkly into the arena pool. The creature had to be every bit of 20 feet, 6 meters long. I watched in horror once again as a single amphibian dove into the pool with nothing but an obsidian knife. As he entered the water, the creature sensed his presence immediately and turned about to attack him. The alien hovered in the water, awaiting its arrival. At the last moment, when I thought all was lost, the brave amphibian rotated his body in a whirl of motion onto the back of the animal. In an instant, he was thrusting his black dagger into the back of the predator. The animal reacted violently, propelling the attacker from his back. In a flash, the bold amphibian rocketed out of the pool, knife still in hand. The enwrapped crowd went wild with glee, celebrating the foolhardy bravery of this conquering hero. A second, likewise armed amphibian dove into the water after the wounded fish. However, the animal was more cautious now, carefully circling his prey rather than headlong rushing to attack. When he finally moved in, toothy mouth agape to strike, the second alien tried a similar trick to the first. This time, though, the wizened predator was prepared. Instead of a successful position from which to attack, the unfortunate second attacker found himself firmly in the jaws of the monster. To my horror, his body was promptly bitten in half, with the lower half sinking to the bottom while the upper half was swallowed ravenously. I barely watched as a team of swimming spearmen slaughtered the creature and retrieved the remains of their fallen comrade. I looked at my hostess alarmed, but she sadly beamed to me that life and death were part of the games, as they were part of life in the sea and land. I strove to understand her viewpoint, but my 21st century human morality couldn't help but be shocked by such an unnecessary death in some alien gladiatorial games. There were several more events, but in my state of shock, they barely registered with me. I just numbly reclined on my dark shelf, trying to forget the violent death I had just witnessed. Suddenly, A dramatic shift in the mood of the aliens in the stadium washed over me like a telepathic tsunami. It had begun to rain. The drops came down slowly at first, then became great torrents sweeping the landscape. The amphibians greeted the pelting monsoon rain with unrestrained joy. All in the amphitheater disrobed and began to embrace one another, at first in communal celebration, but quickly progressing into something that finally brought home the true meaning of my hostess when she said the festival would only be completed when the rains came and the people joined together. While not approved by nature, I decided that now might be a good time to take my leave of Amphibia and return to my physical body on Earth. I turned to thank my hostess, but she was otherwise engaged. I took my leave without further ceremony. I hope you found that interesting. It was a very profound experience for me. As I said, when I returned, I took a lot of notes and placed them in my journal, but I had never actually, until this time, wrote the entire experience out and actually have related the entire experience ever. So this is the first time it's ever been presented. I hope you enjoyed it. Going forward, we have a lot of things going on. I have a new website for the channel. It is www.astralplaneclub.com. That's www.astralplaneclub.com. Please check it out when you have a chance. I'll try to leave it in the comments as well. I'd like everyone to continue to like the videos that they like. Please share them with anyone else you know who is of a similar temperament and as smart as you people are. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already and hit that bell button so that you're always notified whenever I leave a new podcast. As always, I will see you on the astral plane.